Hey up! Right, I never expected to actually be making this video. Over the years I've showcased quite a few genuine brass parts for customising motorcycles, and I've always shown very clearly what they look like when you receive them, you know, like this, bright shiny brass parts. And maybe it's just me, I'm out of whack with the rest of the world, but if I went onto a website and they showed me pictures like this of a product and it said polished brass in the description for that product, this is exactly what I would expect to receive. Now, in each and every one of those videos I've always explained how brass will naturally patinize over time, like you see here. I think at the time of filming these had been on 6 or 8 months, something like that, and these franking bobbins had been on about 1.5 years. Like a lot of other people, I really like that look. They do look a bit bright when they're new, but it's a natural process that takes time. Now, granted, I've had the odd comment in the videos over the years, people sort of saying, oh yeah, they're too bright and shiny, I don't like it. Sort of acting as though they've been misled in some way. Now, I didn't realise it was such a major problem, but Sam at Motone and a lot of his retailers are pulling the hair out over this sort of attitude. You know, people buying them, fitting them for a month, and then because they haven't instantly sort of mellowed to the colour that they like, sending them back and complaining that they're faulty. Seriously, that's what's happening. Now, I'm a patient person that's quite happy to allow nature to take its course. It's clear that there's a lot of people who are not patient, but luckily there is a safe, easy and relatively quick way of instantly aging or antiquing brass that doesn't really cost you anything and doesn't require any special equipment. So today I'm going to show you how to do it. Now, this is a perfectly natural and long-lasting patinization. It's only permanent if you don't physically scrape it off either with a metal object or with an abrasive like a polish or something like that. It is just like natural patinization. It's not a paint or a coating in the sense you would normally understand that phrase. And yes, companies like Motone Customs could pre-treat these parts to look like this, but it takes several hours, it takes up some space, especially if you're doing large batches of parts, and it requires that you've got to pay someone to do it and supervise the process, which would double the cost of your parts. Whereas at home, you can do this for probably less than 50 pence. Now, there's two sort of methods that you can use for this. One gives you a very perfect uniform finish, which I personally think looks a bit false. Or, and this method is actually easier, you can go for the proper sort of old school antique look like the one that you're looking at here, which I personally think looks more natural and realistic. If you've ever been in an old building with brass door handles, you'll often find the part of the door handle that you touch regularly will be a very deep brown tone, but around the edges where people's fingers don't normally interact with the part, they'll be a bit rough and scabby. And that's the effect that I've tried to achieve here. Alright, it's not perfect, I would probably have to experiment a little bit to get it exactly how I wanted it, but that should give you an idea. Now, I should add, this is permanent, but it can be reversed simply by polishing the part back up, so there's no worries if it should go horribly wrong, and to be honest, it's hard for it to go wrong. 20 minutes with some metal polish will bring it back to as new condition again. Now, there's nothing new about this method. It's a simple procedure that antique furniture restorers have been using for decades. All you require is something like a Tupperware container, a reasonably large one depending on the size of the part that you're treating. Some ordinary household white vinegar. I've heard that this does work with cider vinegar as well, but white vinegar's generally cheaper. I think I paid 95 pence for a full litre of the stuff. I got that from my local pound shop, which if you live in America, you probably called a thrift store. And it's just ordinary food grade white vinegar. There's nothing special about it, and any brand will do. You're also going to need to devise some sort of platform to keep your part out of the vinegar. I just used one of those takeaway containers that you get with the Chinese or whatever, placed upside down in the container to put the part on top so that your part isn't physically touching the vinegar. Now, the beauty of using something like a takeaway container is that the brass parts are heavy, so it'll hold it down to the bottom, a bit like a diving bell. So it will displace the amount of vinegar that you're putting in there, so you won't have to use as much. Although you might have to rethink it if you're using a small, light part. Now, the part that I chose for demonstration here was actually one of the first prototype brass Monza caps. This was never intended to be fitted to a motorcycle. It's not even threaded for fitting to a tank. It was just Moton Custom's very first attempt at casting brass. It wasn't something they were used to doing. And it's been sitting in my office for, I think, 3 or 4 years. Now, if I remember correctly, I did make a video sort of showcasing it at the time, and it had a few finger marks on it, so I gave it a good polish up with some Meguiar's Next Generation metal polish. And Meguiar's leaves a sort of a protective coating on that retards tarnishing, so it hadn't tarnished too much, but it was looking a little bit grubby. I wanted to show you how to achieve both finishes, so I repolished just the very top surface of the cap itself and left the sides as they were, which, you know, they're the bits that had been handled the most, so they were showing some tarnish marks, but it wasn't bad. Now, the reason I polished the top up is I'm sort of trying to replicate the action of the rider of the bike, frequently opening and closing this with gloved hands. So it's patinized with age, but it's sort of worn smooth, if you know what I mean. So when the treatment's been finished, you will get that very rich, deep brown patina, but it'll still be very smooth and shiny. The sides and the edges of the cap are just left as it was. I didn't polish those, and it's important when you've finished doing this, if this is the route you go down, that you clean the entire part thoroughly with something like U-Pol pre-paint wipe, which is just a naphtha based panel wipe, or you can use something like alcohol. After that, give it a thorough rinse under hot running water and then dry it off, ready for treatment. Now, one point that I should make at this point is that polishing closes the pores of the metal up, so it will make it less reactive to the vinegar, so the process on the polished parts will take longer. It actually took 8 hours to get the finished effect that you saw near the beginning of the video. The sides that weren't polished reacted much quicker. Now, once you've done that, put it on the platform inside your chosen container, but make sure that when the lid is fitted to that container, there is some clearance between the lid and the part. You don't want the lid touching the part. Then pour your vinegar in. I put altogether just over half a litre of vinegar into the container. Be careful not to splash it on your part. Now, antique furniture restorers, when they're fitting like new brass handles onto a chest of drawers or something, that chest of drawers could be 200 years old, and they're trying to make the handles look as though they're original to the furniture. So they will often paint the vinegar on, but there is a skill to doing that and replicating sort of wear and weathering patterns. In this instance, we're just going to use the vapour from the vinegar to cause the reaction that we want. Now, this reaction is actually caused by acetic acid. White vinegar is just a very dilute solution of acetic acid. And by sealing the part in that container with the acetic acid, what we're doing is we're encouraging the evaporation of the acid so that it's filling the container up with acetic acid fumes, which will then uniformly react with the part. Now, I messed up a bit with the filming here. First of all, I hadn't put enough vinegar in the bottom of the container, so I had to top it up. The reaction was occurring around the edge of the cap, but it wasn't sort of spreading to the centre of the cap. So of course the logical answer to that was to raise the level of the vinegar so that the fumes would move higher up in the container. Also, I had a really cool idea of showing the reaction taking place through a time lapse, but I did it in the kitchen, and of course the kitchen is a busy place. People were kicking the tripod, Willow was moving the tripod, and that whole plan just fell apart. So 8 hours in, it had about reached the point where it was clear it wasn't going to react any further. Now when you take it out, it's going to feel sticky. It may even be covered in a sort of a green verdigris here and there. Don't worry, that's perfectly normal. But if you leave it in that state, the reaction's going to continue, so you just need to rinse it off with clean, cold water and make sure you rinse it thoroughly. Then all you need to do is dry it with a cloth or tissue or something similar, and it's ready to fit to your bike. Now, this reaction leaves a very thin, and when I say thin, I'm talking microns, crust or layer over the top of the metal. It will be very resilient. Obviously metal objects scraping against it will remove it back to clean brass underneath, and any form of abrasive like a metal polish will also remove it. I would advise that once you've got a finish that you're happy with, just give it a coat of carnauba wax, and just pure automotive carnauba wax, nothing with any cut or abrasives in it. It may still continue to patinize over time, that is natural, or of course if you decide you don't like it, half an hour with some Maguire's metal polish will bring it back to its original state. Now for comparison, I just used one of Motorn Custom's governors here, and I just used the hot water wash off method. I didn't polish it. And personally, I think this gives the best effect. It looks like a part that's been on for several years. To me, it has quite a natural look to it. I think if you strive for perfection, it often ends up looking a bit false. But that's entirely up to the individual. You know, everyone has different requirements. There's no right or wrong way, it's entirely how you want it to look. And just for comparison, this part only required 2 hours. Obviously, everything that we've used in this process is food grade. I mean, I wouldn't recommend putting the vinegar on your chips after you've used it for this process, but you're not messing about with any sort of hazardous chemicals. It's just a fun little project, really. Right, I think I've just about covered everything. Obviously, you're trying to encourage evaporation of the acetic acid from the vinegar, so very low temperatures this probably won't work, or it will work incredibly slowly. You need to be at least at room temperature. But having said that, you don't need to actually apply heat to it for this process to take place. Once again, thank you so much for watching this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. I will of course be back next week, so until then, ride safely and I'll see you soon.